All right, so we have with us today Jim and Maureen Gainey. And for those of you who are viewing this, my relationship to Jim and Maureen is that I was married to their son, Jim, who passed away from stage 4 colon cancer in January of 2016. Jim and I got together in May of 2002. So it will be 19 years that I have been kind of part of the Gainey family and have been very blessed in that regard.
Not
That kind of
not
part.
kind of a part. You're a part.
You're a part.
You're stuck with us.
You're
I
stuck.
am lucky to be stuck with you forever and ever. And I will say that with Jim's diagnosis occurring 8 years ago, there would be no way that I could have gone through that process and the process after he passed without my relationship to you two. It's something I'm grateful for every day, and grateful that my children continue to have you in their lives, and even as a larger part of their lives now that we live down in Illinois. So with that being said, I asked Jim and Maureen if they would join us today because their role as grandparents to Jim's and my children kind of took a different turn when he got diagnosed in terms of what we needed out of them, because our role of needing more help because of his sickness and what we needed the grandparents to do in terms of how they interacted with the children, mainly in regards to, we did not, I don't know what I'm trying to say. There were times where they needed to step in as almost parents to our kids, in terms of disciplining and things like that, because they almost became co-parents to us. And I'll let Jim and Maureen speak to that more. But furthermore, I want them to address their experience as parents to somebody who was diagnosed with cancer, because I don't know what that feels like. So what was your initial reaction to Jim's diagnosis?
Well, he called me on my 63rd birthday and said he was at the doctor's office, and we had had dinner with you and Jim and the boys the day before, kind of a pre-birthday celebration. And we knew he wasn't feeling well and was going to go to the doctor. And I was hoping he'd say, "Hey, I've got an ulcer or something, and I'm going to have to do this." So for about the next 2 hours, I was waiting to hear back because they were going to do some more tests. And we went over to my oldest daughter, Meg's house. She and her husband and Maureen and I share a phone plan. And we're talking about that. And of course, my mind was totally elsewhere. And then Jim called, and I broke the news to Meg and Maureen and Robert.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the worst day of my life.
Yeah.
Until another day.
Until January 11th.
And I was not aware. I was aware that he wasn't feeling well, but I did not know that he had called his father about going to the doctor, or what they were doing as far as testing and so forth. And so I was kind of taken by surprise.
I was also, but I just figured it was better to wait till we knew for sure what it was, because the hell I was going through.
Yeah.
I didn't want to share.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and with that being said, we didn't know what to expect that day when we sent him off to the doctor. I remember being shocked when he said that he was having a CAT scan, and certainly shocked when he called me to tell me that I needed to go in to the doctor to hear the news with him. And Jim was always protective of you, Maureen, and he gets that from his dad.
Yeah.
So I can imagine why he wouldn't call you, that he was going to call dad. But I remember calling you that night and saying that as a mother, I don't know how I couldn't be with my child right away when they're going through something like that, and that you guys were welcome to come up at any point, without even any notice to us, just to be with him because after I was while I was still processing what it was like as his wife and as the mother of his kids, my mind went to, oh my gosh, if this was one of my boys, I would, move heaven and earth to make this better and want to be with them as much as possible. So
I
I'm
kind of feel like we were in shock, I mean, and I'm sure, I know you were too, just stunned because I never thought, I would never have imagined that was what was going on. And we know of some people here, in fact, someone who's a little older than Jim, had lymphoma, and that's very treatable, even though it's very scary as well. And that's what I was thinking. Okay, good. It's a mass. It's going to be lymphoma, and that's going to be fine. And you give yourself any kind of a life raft that you can grab onto, and that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
But, it didn't turn out that way at all.
Yeah.
So,
that was even me at his colonoscopy. I couldn't process that the surgeon was saying there was a mass in his colon. And I was still hoping it was lymphoma until we heard that news in the afternoon. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a universal feeling when somebody's diagnosed with cancer, whether it's yourself or a loved one, that there's just so much shock involved. You're not anticipating that, because you don't want it.
Until he had it, we weren't aware that, that there was so lately that, how many people who were younger than that 50-year-old
like screening age
place for screening. We thought that, that couldn't possibly be because, he wasn't that old yet. He wasn't even close to that age.
Well, I had told Jim and his sisters, because of the prevalence in our family on my side, they should start when they were 40. I did. And I had polyps at 40, and I've had polyps most of this time since then. A few times not, but we never dreamt that he'd have it at 31.
No.
Right. Well, and he took that advice to heart. That was our plan, was when he was 40, he was going to go in, and he had no problem with that. And, it was a proactive plan. And we were just 9 years too late, I guess, so to speak. It was too early and never should have happened. And,
it was quite a shock. I would say we were definitely in shock when that happened. I couldn't wrap my head around it, frankly.
Right.
But
right.
I had to. I had to accept it because it was the reality.
Right. So when Jim was diagnosed, we were living in Wisconsin, and our boys were 10 months old and 3. And you guys were living in Sterling. Still are. And my parents lived in Madison, my sisters lived in Madison, and one of Jim's sisters lives in Madison. So we had a lot of family support, and you guys came up as much as you could, especially when we faced like an emergency surgery for Jim right after his diagnosis.
Right.
And however, Maureen, you were still working. Jim, you were retired by the time of his diagnosis?
That was,
Or was it like in
the last year I worked, and that was when they cut my position to half-time. So I decided that, I wasn't going to do that. And
right.
It's kind of funny because otherwise I would have, really been upset about my job, and it wasn't this way that I found out and all that, but I looked at it and thought, wow, I'll be able to spend some time now to help Jim and Kat.
Well, it was
blessing in disguise, I think.
Yeah, it allowed me to be literally, I can think of 2 or 3 times when you called me at 3 or 4 in the morning and said, can you come? And I could. That was
right. No, I remember
put me in
that.
a position, and a lot of times I watched the boys while you and Jim had to deal with the other stuff, and I think it made the boys and I closer. But,
I think so too. I think so too.
Yeah.
I
would rather have taken them fishing.
I would rather,
Anything.
you know, yeah, I agree. And, you know, because we had to lean on you guys, I remember, I don't know if I had the conversation with you guys, but I remember having the conversation with my parents because they're a little bit more lenient with the grandkids. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but they're the kind of grandparents that like would feed the kids candy for dinner. And they give them
What's
16.
wrong with that?
So I remember pulling
Cake for
them.
breakfast is good. It's flour, milk.
I mean, Cadbury eggs for breakfast. It has the word eggs in its name. I
Eggs
remember
with it.
pulling my parents aside and saying, look, because you're here so much and because I can't always be here to parent the kids the way I want to because of everything going on, I'm going to need you to co-parent a little bit, which means disciplining the grandchildren when they need discipline, because I didn't want them to grow up, you know, feeling entitled, being overly spoiled because of our situation. And so I don't recall if we had that conversation or if I ever felt like I needed to have that conversation with you, because God
We
love
don't
you,
give
you're
a
just
fuck.
amazing grandparents. But
No,
We spoil them.
we spoil them in other ways. I
but
mean,
you
know,
do.
we always make sure that, you know, and many times when we were in restaurants with them and that, other people would compliment them on their
Yes.
behavior.
yes.
And that was because of the way that you and Jim had raised them, and Maureen and I reinforced that kind of stuff.
Right.
So they knew what their boundaries were.
Mhm.
At the same time, they knew if they wanted the Godzilla model from Walmart, it was in the cart.
Yeah,
you
it was
know?
in the
That sounds like a couple weeks ago.
but that's what grandparents are able to do. And,
Right.
you know, but I also don't want them to grow up. And I don't think we're really, you know, mean about the discipline or anything, but like if they're doing something, they do this one thing where they, at about 5 o'clock at night, they've done their homework if they're staying over, you know, on a night that they have homework, and they get in the room and they're watching a video until I get supper done, right? They start to giggle and laugh, and I know I'm going to hear somebody hit something and they're going to get hurt because they've been fooling around. And
Right.
you know, and I know one time, I think, didn't they jump around and they broke some of those angels that I have. But anyway, and Bridget was there
I
that
didn't
time.
know that.
Well, they were giggling and doing silly stuff, you know, like they do. But the thing is, when that starts, I come in and I say, cut it out, or you're going to be sitting in 2 different chairs
Right.
in different rooms, because somebody's going to get hurt. And that's all I care about, is the
And-
fact that you're going to get
And they
hurt.
know we'll follow through on it.
Yeah, and they know we'll
Mhm.
follow through.
Yes.
And then we just sit them in different places. We don't do that much anymore, though, because they're older. They still do it sometimes.
And now
Oh,
I just
yeah.
tell them, you want me to tell Grandma?
Grandma's old. But
Which
no,
is
but they're
funny because I use I'm going to call your grandpa with them.
Well, and actually, I'll tell them if Grandma has to call me upstairs, because we'll let them watch a movie pre-bedtime and stuff in the bedroom, and say, if Grandma has to have me come upstairs, you're not going to like it.
No.
No.
And they know I'm telling them the truth,
Yes.
that
Well-
they'll lose the privileges or whatever. So
Well, you guys are very consistent, and I feel like throughout the process of us dealing with Jim's diagnosis and his treatments and his decline, that you guys were very respectful of the parenting style that Jim and I were, had been fostering with them, and that you just came in kind of seamlessly and picked up where we couldn't fill in at the times, and you filled those gaps, and you did it in a way that we appreciated, because it was based on the values and the discipline techniques and things like that we were using. And it should be mentioned that Maureen, you were still working when Jim was passing, but you were there as much as possible, especially in those last few weeks. But Jim, you basically moved in with us those last few months because you were able to, which was something we never would have pictured, but I remain incredibly grateful for that, because I was still working. Jim worked up until like
December.
mid-November
Right.
of 2015 before we basically asked him to stop. So with that being said, how do you feel like your role as grandparents to Jim's and my kids versus versus perhaps the way you've grandparented with the other kids, with your other grandkids? Like, has there been much difference, or has it just been?
We treat them all the same way, it's like.
And we usually explain. why we
I've
do.
always told them, if I tell you no, it's because it will hurt you or someone or something else. Otherwise, we can look at it and see if it's a possibility. But, that works with all of them.
Mhm.
There's really no difference. We expect the same behavior from all of them. And most of them.
And they're not perfect,
No.
but I think they have very nice manners, most of them, all of
Yeah,
them.
they're little
actually.
stinkers sometimes.
Yeah, well, yeah, they all try stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
look what Jim did. Jim was great.
It's in their genes. I don't know where Jim got it, but
yeah.
No,
Right.
it's hard to tell.
yeah.
But this is a little story, but Finn was at Bridget's house one day, and we came to visit, and he came to the door and he said, "Grandma, what did Daddy do? What did you do to Daddy when he did something wrong and he had to sit out, or he had to have a timeout?" And I said, "Well," and I'm looking at Bridget like, "What?" And she said, "Well, don't you remember that time when we were at the store? We were at the store and Jim wanted something and he got mad and he didn't get candy and he threw himself on the floor."
I did not.
Not Jim. And so Meg had tried the same thing in Barneveld when we lived up in Barneveld, and I picked her up by the scruff of her snowsuit and I took her out to the car because I was by myself. I didn't hurt her. I just said, we don't need anything in this grocery store if you're going to act like this. And I just put her in her car seat. Well, the same thing happened with Jim. He threw himself on the floor and he was kicking and screaming. And that time, Big Jim was with me, and I had the girls. And so I said, "Just take him to the car." And he was really shocked that we were going to take him out of the store, but he did go out and he sat in the car. And Finn said, "Well, what did you do then?" And I said, "Well, actually, I finished grocery shopping, and when we got to the checkout, there are candies and stuff there. And I thought, well, the girls have behaved very nicely, so they're going to get a treat." So they got a treat. They got a candy bar. And I don't remember what kind. It doesn't matter. So we get out to the car. Well, Jim didn't get one. And I said he had to sit out in the truck with Grandpa until we were done. And, he did. And he said, "Well, didn't he just have to sit out?" I said, "No." I said, "He didn't have to do that. But the next time he went grocery shopping with me, he didn't throw himself on the floor."
Right.
And he said, "Well, did he get candy?" I said, "As a matter of fact, he did, because he really behaved well." And so, I'm teaching him, and he's interested about what his daddy did when he was young, because he's really curious about that. He wasn't very old when his father passed, so he doesn't have those memories of anything like that happening. So I try to share that with him, and he'll ask me too, when we're together, "Well, what did Dad do when this, or where?" And a lot of people at school know Jim from when he was at school, and so they'll ask their teachers questions about that too. They've mentioned that. And the thing is, you just have to explain things. Why am I asking you not to throw yourself on the floor? Well, you're obviously having a temper tantrum and you're annoying other people, and it's not appropriate. So but you just try to be civil about it, and just explain. They just are wondering about stuff, and he loves to hear stories of his dad. And also the other thing, Seamus and I had a very nice talk this last time that they were here for that week while you were working right after Easter, Seamus and I sat down and we talked about a lot of things that his dad did or didn't do or, wanted for the boys. And I try to keep him alive in a sense because they are curious about it. And I don't, it's not a taboo story. It's if they're sad, like I took the kids to school one morning and I heard Finn pipe up, I really miss my dad today. Well, so do I. Let's talk about that. What did you like best about your dad? And so we talk about daddy,
Right.
and because they want to, and it's not taboo. I mean, they ask you things
Right.
all the time because, you did so many things with Jim,
Mhm.
and
Well, and that's the thing. I think that maybe that's one way that your grandparent role has changed slightly because you've become the keeper of the stories for the boys.
yeah.
I mean, I try every day to keep Jim's memory alive for the boys and tell stories, and so does Jason. And like you said, other people in the community that we've met since moving down here and that we run into at school and things like that. But I think that while we would all rather that Jim were here to be doing things and creating his own memories with the boys, I think that's a very valuable role that you and the girls, your daughters, and other family members play in the boys' lives, because I can share stories from the time that we were together, but unfortunately he was only alive for 14 of those years. And so you obviously have a much longer history with him than I did. And so I think the boys really turned to you guys for finding out who their daddy was around the same age period that they're in right now. And right now they're 11 and 8, almost 9. So, they were looking for that additional connection, and you guys really provide that. And I think it's great that our family has been so open with sharing their grief, so that the boys learn that grief is a part of life, and you can live with it, and you can go through your day-to-day carrying it, but it doesn't have to consume you. You can carry on and do what you need to do to thrive and succeed and learn resilience and all of those wonderful traits that I really like to think we collectively as a family. I will not take full credit for that. And I think it's been a very much a family driven event for the kids to learn that resilience. And I hope that that's something that they can, carry on through any challenges they face in life. But this was definitely the first one that they're going to face in life, was the death of their father at a young age. And it's one that will have a lifelong impact on them. So we as a family, I feel like, have really done our best to keep that memory alive, keep his love for them alive, and teach them that, hardships happen and they're going to impact us, but we also can continue to live our lives, because that's what Daddy would have wanted to. So.
Well, and I do think too, I don't know if you want to continue on the line about, keeping him alive, but the epitome for me so far has been that day we were in the restaurant and we were celebrating Daddy's birthday, and he wanted that Oreo.
Oh, then again.
We had like carrot cake and Oreo cake, and they had a great big, round circle of the Oreo, and you were going to cut it in half. And he looks up at the ceiling, and of course we're religious people, quite kind of, I guess, because he looks up at the ceiling and he goes, "Dad, tell her I have to have the whole Oreo." "Come on, Dad." And it was hysterical. I mean, and it's like you almost want to laugh till you're crying because it's so funny.
Right.
But, and the thing is, you gave him the Oreo, and it was a big slice of cake, and he ate the whole thing, of course.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because we try to instill in the boys, the fact that, you know, God's with you, but also your dad.
Mhm.
He, if there's anyone in the whole wide world or in the history of the world, he is going to be watching over his boys and you know
Mhm.
that, you know, and he has, he's been taking care of us too, by the way, in different times. And I'm not going to cry, but you know, I just thought, if that isn't faith, you know, in
Well,
the
like-
life ever after, you know, I mean, he believes his father is there, and
Yes.
we know he is.
Yes.
So, you know,
Yes.
that was
They do. I think they do. I think we've instilled that pretty deeply, actually.
Yeah.
What about as parents having your son diagnosed at 31 with terminal cancer? I mean, how did that, I mean, like you said earlier, it was shocking. It's been painful, life-changing.
Yep.
But how did you see yourself change in your way of parenting Jim? I mean, he was 31. He had his own family. He lived in a different state, but like, you're still his parents. So was there anything that you'd like to speak on to that?
I don't think anything changed that much, because for any of the kids, if they, you know, needed our help and we could physically or mentally or whatever provide it for them, we did. It was just at that point, Jim was getting a lot more attention than,
but he needed it, and
he
there's
needed
no jealousy about that.
Meg and Bridget were, you know, totally
Rock stars about
okay
it.
with that. It was,
Yeah.
you know, and it was funny because sometimes Bridget and I were, you know, well, I'm going to stay with them at the hospital. No, I'm going to stay with them. Yeah.
I remember that.
A couple of times I told her, look, you've got to go to work.
Right.
You know, there's a reason I'm here. So,
Mhm.
but at the same time, I knew there were times when I'd have to say, yeah, Bridget, you go ahead, because she needed that too.
Mhm. Yep.
But initially, I totally lost it, and I had no idea how we would get through that.
No. Yeah, I think it was so life altering and such a shock to absorb, and so overwhelming with the unknowns and what it was going to look like. And then we kind of hit our normal. We kind of hit a stride with chemo is going to be every other week, and this is our new normal. And yeah, we kind of live by scan to scan, until those last 6 months. I feel like things kind of leveled out for the most part. There weren't any like major emergencies after that first couple of months, I think. So,
even in going with the normal, I remember when Jim had his port put in, he asked him if it could be on the left side.
Yes.
And normally do it on the right. And they said, well, you can have it on either side. And they said, why do you want it on the left? He said, well, I can't shoot my rifle if it's on the right.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, he deer hunted up to the very end, you know?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, it was, I mean, he knew that he didn't want cancer to define him, and he didn't want it to change his life more than it had to. So it was funny when he met another cancer patient up there that had his port on the left, and they discussed why, because it was unusual, like you said. And they were like, well, we're hunters, like you got to be able to hold your gun in the right spot. Like, we're not going to give that up. So that
and he really did live until he died. I mean, he really did live until that last maybe 2-3 weeks. He was really in pain, a lot of pain. But
it was, that was horrible. So what do you think as parents and as as parents of a cancer patient and as grandparents of kids with a parent who had cancer, what do you have any advice of what people in your situation should know, or coping strategies that may have helped you?
Pray a lot.
Yeah.
Figured that would happen.
Absolutely. And
It's not something that you're prepared to do.
no,
No.
I don't, yeah, and even though, you know, we were able to have long talks too, Jim and I, young Jim and I, and and big Jim
And old Jim.
and old Jim. But I think that you just have to kind of roll with the punches. I mean, sometimes we thought we had good news and we didn't. But I think he was so determined to live and to live as long as he could. And he really had a good attitude, you know, he really did. He had a good attitude. And I know that, you know, some of the times the medication would get him very angry. But that's not him. And you knew that too.
No,
but it's
that was
hard to
never
take.
him.
It's hard to take,
Yeah,
you know.
Like his father, he did have a temper too.
Yes, he did. But
Yeah,
he,
I think that, I mean, it was mainly, you know, at times when he would get double doses of steroids because he was getting them with treatment.
Yeah.
And then when he would go in for fluids, the first couple of times they were adding steroids to the fluids, and we couldn't figure it out for a few times. And then I was like, oh my goodness, like this is like a roid rage situation. This is not my husband. This is ridiculous. And you know, but I always I couldn't fully put myself in his position, just like you couldn't either, in terms of like the internal, you know, sadness and stress and like conflict over his diagnosis that he was feeling, and like facing his own mortality. Like I was facing the mortality of my husband, you were facing the mortality of your son, but he was facing his own. And as much as he wanted to hide that from the people that loved him the most, he couldn't always do that. And then that would come out in frustration. And so, you know, really, you know, the only time that he was totally unreasonable was the couple of times that he just had an overdose of steroids, and he yelled at me for putting laundry on the floor, like clean laundry on the floor. And he was unreasonable at that moment because Maureen was there and she knows exactly what I'm talking about. But but overall, like he was so appreciative of his family rallying around him. You know, appreciative of the time he spent with the kids, even on days that he was in bed for, you know, 2 or 3 days in a row, and they would come bounce into bed with him and give him goodnight kisses and maybe read a story with daddy or something like that. But I mean, he wanted to live for as long as possible for those kids. And I'm sure he would be incredibly, and they know that there was nowhere else he would rather be. He made that very clear. But I think that I think he would be incredibly proud of you two for the way you've helped the children know him, you know, continue to know him, the support you've provided them, the support you've provided me. And I think he'd just be really proud of how our family has remained, you know, a constant source of love and support to one another.
There's a cardinal sitting on right out the window.
So Jim's visiting?
Jim's visiting, yes. I want to mention something too, if you don't mind, if we have time. I don't know.
Yeah, you're fine.
But one of the things that I think that not necessarily the grandparents should do, but maybe we could have written down some more things for the kids, but I guess I like to talk to them face to face more than writing it down. But Jim did make a log, you know, and he has written a lot of things for the boys and done some things for the boys for special occasions. And you know that. And but I'm just mentioning it for the people that are listening to this. But he and you have had cards ready for different things that the boys have had when they marry, I know Jim said he has a card that ready for them for that, and graduations and things like that, and
Yep.
different sacraments because we're religious. But anyway, and I think it's wonderful that he has something written and they know it's written and they can read that it's him.
Yes.
Not that you would say that you wrote it, you didn't,
No,
but
right.
maybe you wrote with, or maybe you wrote with him, I don't know, but I haven't read it yet. I haven't been able to, but I'm gonna try. But it's so nice to know that he wanted them to know about how much he loved them, and
Yeah.
just to have those things ready, that the kids know that,
Yeah.
when they graduate or.
Well, and that too, we have to make sure there are some things like the deer rifle that will be Seamus's. That was mine. It was my dad's before that. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's okay to cry.
And
Yeah.
there's some of those first son things.
Mm-hmm.
And I always try to make sure that there's something too for Finn, that
Right.
he gets something important, that it doesn't, Seamus is the firstborn son and all that, but
Namesake.
we want to make sure that Finn gets equal memories and keepsakes and things like that.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Well,
there's other guns for Finn and
right. Well,
those types
with
of things.
we obviously didn't plan it this way, but when Jim and I got married, he had your dad's wedding ring, right, Jim? Yep. So we got married and he had that ring, and then I had bought him a wedding band too. So
The two of
lo
them.
and behold, we have two boys and they'll each have daddy's wedding bands. So even though Seamus, being the firstborn, will probably have your dad's band, Finn will get his dad's band as well. So, didn't obviously plan that. Had no idea how any of this would work out, but I,
Oh, either.
would change it if I could. But you're right. I mean, that's, and I don't think Finn feels slighted at all. I don't know how he'll feel when he grows up, because in my opinion,
Well, that's the thing. I don't want him to look back on it and go, well, Seamus got everything and I got, the leftovers. And I definitely want to make sure that in their eyes, things have equal status.
right.
And in some situations, like the picture of Jim with the big buck that he got with his bow, I'm framing one for each of them to have.
Right.
It's
Right.
not, here's a picture of your dad that you can fight over. Here's one for you and one for you.
Right. No, and that's what I did with the last letter that I found of his. Now they share a room, but they were in separate rooms at the time when we found it, and we were living in Wisconsin, and they each had a framed copy of that letter in their rooms. And my only regret with Finn is that he didn't get as much time with Jim as Seamus did, but I do love his ongoing curiosity about his dad and his openness to asking about daddy from anybody and everybody. So I don't think, like I said, I don't think he feels slighted or cheated right now. And my hope is that we're doing all the right things to keep him from feeling that way in the future. And like I said, when you mentioned like the letters that we had written, or that Jim had written, and the cards that we wrote, I wrote in those too, because it was very difficult to get Jim to the point where he was willing to write in the cards. And I think it was November or December by the time he was willing to do them. And I could see what was coming, and I really wanted those to get done for the sake of the kids and not have a regret that we didn't do them. So he would write
That's
them.
a really good thing.
Huh?
I think it's a really good thing to do for kids when
right.
That this is happening.
Right. Well, and I think honestly, you never know what's going to happen in your lives. You guys have, been through some crazy things, to say the least. And so you don't know what's going to happen next. And so even if it's somebody who's watching this, who's
Never.
not, going through cancer, just so there are tokens of remembrance for your loved ones to have, which is why, like, I keep a journal. Jim kept a journal, and the cards, I wrote in the cards, and I think I even wrote in like the wedding ones that was like, yeah, might not make sense when you open this, why I wrote in this too. However, this is what I want you to know, even though right now you're 3 years old and I can't even imagine you standing in an altar getting married to somebody, but and I think it helped Jim feel a little less put on the spot, with writing those, but we also, did, write down, like you said, he was born and raised Catholic. I was not, but we're raising the kids Catholic. And I wanted to know what his opinions were on, gifts for different sacraments. And shortly before he passed, we had all gone to that, Shrine of Our Lady of Good Help and picked out different, like metal cross necklaces for the boys for one of their sacraments, for their first reconciliation, I believe. And like he mentioned things he wanted them to receive for like their graduations and I think their weddings as well. So so we try, like, because of my relationship with Jim, and I feel like we had a pretty, like, we were a normal couple. We were a normal couple that had to go through some really tough things at a young age that we didn't want to have to deal with his cancer, but we were also a very like well-connected couple who loved each other very much. And so I think my purpose with having his children and being in charge of raising his children is that he will always be a part of those special occasions. So I'm glad we had those hard conversations, as difficult as they were, to face that reality that we were gonna, have to experience. But it's something I never regret. It's been so meaningful to give the boys gifts on their sacrament days that their daddy picked out with me or told me to get for them. So it just adds an element of like, he's, like we said, like he's still here. He's still a part of this day, whether or not we see him. So I don't know. I'm sorry I'm crying. This is ridiculous. I don't usually cry on Zoom.
Don't ever apologize. Don't ever apologize for crying.
So
I've learned that over time. I didn't used to be a person who cried.
yeah.
John Wayne says never apologize is a sign of weakness.
No, it's a sign of strength. Actually.
Well, is there anything else you guys would like to add?
Well, I guess just really, talk to the kids, talk to them. Don't let them wonder what's actually going on, but you can't give them too much information at some ages, you have to kind of watch that. But, like I know that you went to, I won't be able to think of the
Gilda's Club?
Yeah, Gilda's Club.
Mm-hmm.
And the children had a chance to talk to other people too about the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And they, of course, are confidential. And I don't know that we have one of those very close to us here, but
one in the Quad Cities.
In the Quad Cities. Well, but I know that Home of Hope has people who come and talk to people, and also the different.
We're talking to one.
Well, I know, but I mean, but I think I'm just saying, if you're in this situation or anything like it, or you just feel that you need something for the kids, I think that you could, reach out to them, and also sometimes the hospice people, and they were wonderful, by the way.
Yeah, our hospice
wonderful. Yeah,
facilitators were excellent.
Make sure that the kids are included, even if it has to be at a very, primary level, because they are going to ask questions. And if you say, well, Daddy's just going away for a little while. He's not going away for a little while. He's going away for the rest of their lives. You know, I mean, you have to be honest with them, and make sure that you don't, you know, put them off when they ask a question. It might make you want to cry, you know. I have a little story about that too. The weekend after Jim passed away and we had gone home, and then we came back the next weekend. I got out of the car and I went up to the house, and the garage door was open, and Finn comes out the house door from the garage, in the garage, and he goes, "Oh, hi, Grandma. Did I tell you my daddy died?" I wanted to turn around and just run home all the way, you know, to Illinois. And I thought, no, I really can't do that. I have to be an adult. And I said, "Yes, sweetheart, I did know that. Don't you remember that we were here?" You know, and he didn't remember that we were there. He was a kid. That's gone, you know, already. But I thought, oh my word.
Well,
but he wanted to share the news with me. And, you know, they are so honest and so open. It's wonderful, but you have to remember what level they're on, you know, and sometimes they may say things that, you know, hurt you for whatever reason, but they just don't understand.
Well, I mean, he was operating at such a typical 3-year-old level while dealing with something that feels so adult, and something that he shouldn't have been experiencing at the time, because I remember the night that Jim passed away, we were all at the nursing home still, and my parents were going to take the boys home, and Jim had probably been gone an hour and a half, something like that. And the rest of us were going to wait for the funeral home to come. And I was explaining to the kids that Grandma and Grandpa, my parents, were going to take them home and get them situated for bed, and that Mommy would be home later. And Finn goes, "Okay, so when is Daddy coming home?" And it immediately was like, I had been prepared for this question because our child psychologist had prepared me for that. However, I was expecting it maybe like the next day, not like an hour and a half later. And it, you know, took my breath away for a minute, and it was, "All right, Finn, remember, Daddy's body is still here, but his spirit and his soul have gone to heaven, and, you know, Daddy's body cannot come back home ever again." And being a very carefree 3-year-old, with everything going on, that was his personality. He was like, "Oh, okay, so I'll see you at home now." I'm like, "Yep, love you." Like, okay, so over that first time that he asked, and I don't recall, I think there were times where they wanted to call Jim, thinking like he's just gone to Bayfield you know, he's up in Bayfield with Grandpa or something like that. And it was that re-explanation of that's not how this works, and I'm sorry, it can't work that way.
You know, they can't understand. They can't understand it at all.
No,
I mean, all of us can't.
But they write their notes and send those.
Yes,
they do. Yeah, that's a tradition that we've held on to, that they
in the bonfire
write notes and put them in fires for Daddy to send them to Daddy. And then I think you guys know this, but yeah, so for people who don't know, Jim was cremated, and we have the majority of his ashes at our house, and his urn is actually in the boys' bedroom because that's where they wanted it to stay. Oh. And so for like his birthday and Father's Day and things like that, they'll write little Post-it notes and fold them up and put them in the urn. So we're just that urn's gonna run out of room, considering how young the boys are. We're gonna have to like have another special container of notes for Daddy. But it's a sweet tradition that they actually continue to enjoy. So but it's things like that, you know, I know you do the notes with the boys in Bayfield with the fire and things like that, and, you know, just the stories and things like that keep him very close to the boys. So
And I think everybody probably will have their own little traditions that they do in their own families, and
Mhm.
it's a way to cope with it.
Yep.
And I think
Yep.
it's one that the kids understand, but you know,
Yeah.
it'll be different with every family, but
Right.
it's a hard thing to get through.
Well,
Mhm.
there was, and I'm not sure at what point, but it was pretty early in Jim's diagnosis. And I said, you know, I'd trade places in a minute.
Mhm.
And he said, oh, hell, Dad, you got the hard part. You got to do all the worrying and all that. He said, all I got to do is go to chemo. I mean, that's,
Right.
you know,
That was Jim.
That was Jim. He, I think, was always more worried about the rest of us and the toll it was taking on our mental health and just how helpless and
But that's
worried.
He's always been like that, though. Even as a little
Mhm.
second grader,
Yeah.
he was more excited about the gift that they were buying for the little girl, and he
Mhm.
wanted to be a little mouse in the corner.
Yeah.
See how happy she'd be. You know, that was just him.
but
He really did take care of other
Yeah,
people
you know.
very much.
he said, you guys have to do all the worrying and all that stuff. And he said, I just got to go get chemo.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, he had a gigantic heart, and I know where it came from. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you guys for being part of this.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you for everything you've done. You know, the kids and I can't do life without you. So,
Well, thank you for all you did for Jim too, and us. You know,
Yeah.
it's
What-
a reciprocal kind of thing.
I would do it again if
So
I
would I.
could. So, well, all right, guys. I love
Okay.
you. Thanks for hanging out with
We
me.
love you too.
Love you too, honey.
Bye.
Bye-bye.